Far away in the vastness of space, beyond the shimmering stars and swirling nebulae, lay the planet Jasara, a world so beautiful it could make any traveler stop in awe. Its mountains were as high as the clouds themselves, and its forests stretched for miles, alive with the songs of creatures no one had ever seen. But amidst the natural beauty of Jasara, there was a story so ancient that it echoed through time. The inhabitants of Jasara were known for one thing above all else: their skin. It was dark, a deep shade of black that seemed to absorb the very light of the stars themselves. Some believed it was a gift from the universe. Others, however, whispered that it was a curse. Silara had lived with this curse all her life. As a child, she didn't understand why the elders spoke of her people as if they were to be feared. She didn't know why the travelers who came to Jasara avoided her eyes, as though her presence could bring disaster. But the adults knew. They knew the truth, at least, the truth they had been taught. And that truth was that anyone born with skin like Silara's carried a dark mark that made them cursed. The curse, they called it. It was said that centuries ago, the first of Silara's kind had angered the gods with their defiance. The gods had cursed them, and with the curse came the power to bring destruction. Ever since that time, the people of her race were seen as dangerous, even evil. There were stories of cities that had burned to the ground after a cursed one was spotted, though none of those stories had ever been proven. It was simply what people believed. Silara wasn't sure if she believed it herself, but there were days when the looks of fear in others' eyes made her doubt. She had seen it all her life. As soon as someone realized her skin color, their expressions would change. The whispers would begin, soft and low, as if she couldn't hear them. The adults would quickly send their children away, and some would even step back, clutching their belongings tightly, as though expecting something terrible to happen at any moment. At first, Silara thought it was just a matter of superstition. After all, she had never done anything to harm anyone. Yet every time she stepped into a room or crossed paths with someone, the fear was there, lingering like a shadow. She would hear people mutter, "Stay away from her. She's cursed," or "She brings misfortune. Don't trust her." Silara had no friends. She spent most of her days alone, wandering the forests and valleys of Jasara, hoping that the wind would carry her away from the hate she felt. But the world always pulled her back. It was hard to escape when the world around you constantly reminded you of your place. Her home was a small, quiet village at the edge of the kingdom. The houses there were made of wood and stone, simple but sturdy. Her family lived in a little cottage surrounded by wildflowers and tall grass. Silara's parents were kind, but even they couldn't change the way the world saw them. They tried to keep her safe, to keep her from harm, but their protection could only go so far. On most mornings, Silara's mother would call to her from inside the house, asking her to come back before the sun began to set. "Be careful, Silara," she would say, her voice heavy with concern. "You know how they are." Silara nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. She had learned to be cautious, always aware of who might be watching her. Even though her heart longed for connection, she had grown to accept that she was different. The people of Jasara, her own people, saw her as a reminder of an ancient curse, and no amount of kindness could change that. But there was one place that always offered her a sense of peace: the wishing tree. It was an ancient tree that grew at the edge of the village, its branches spreading wide like open arms, offering shelter and comfort to those who needed it most. People rarely went near the wishing tree anymore, for it was said to be a place of dark magic, a place where the curse was first born. But for Silara, it was the one place where she felt she could breathe freely, where the weight of the world didn't press down on her so heavily. On this particular morning, Silara walked quietly through the tall grass, her fingers brushing against the leaves as she approached the tree. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden glow over the land. She felt the cool breeze on her face and sighed. It felt good to be away from the village, away from the stairs, and the whispers. As she reached the tree, Solara paused and looked up at its towering branches. The wishing tree had stood there for as long as anyone could remember, its roots stretching deep into the earth. Legends said that if you stood beneath its shade and made a wish, your heart's desire would be granted. Of course, Solara didn't believe in such things. Still, she liked to come here and think. Think about her future, her dreams, and the world beyond her village. She leaned against the rough bark of the tree, closing her eyes. For a moment, she imagined a life where she wasn't cursed, where people didn't fear her for something she couldn't control. She imagined a world where she could walk among others, where no one would turn their backs on her or whisper behind her back. Maybe one day, things will change, she whispered to herself. But as much as she wished for change, Solara knew it was unlikely. The curse was too deeply rooted in the galaxy. It was a belief so ingrained in society that it seemed impossible to erase, and as long as she was marked with that dark skin, she would always be different, always be feared. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her, and her heart skipped a beat. Without turning around, she instinctively tensed, preparing for the usual reaction. Someone would see her skin and run away, or worse, they would shout curses at her. But when she heard the voice, it was different. "Are you all right?" Solara froze. It wasn't the voice of fear, nor of judgment. It was calm, steady, and curious. She slowly turned around and saw a figure standing a few feet away. A young man, his hair dark and messy, his clothes dusty from travel. He didn't seem frightened, didn't seem to care about her skin at all. For a moment, Solara felt a wave of confusion. No one ever spoke to her this way. She didn't know whether to feel relieved or suspicious. People didn't just approach her without fear. I'm fine," she stammered, trying to mask her surprise. "Just thinking." The stranger smiled, a warm, gentle smile that made her heart beat a little faster. "I see. You know, not many people come here anymore. They say this tree is cursed." Solara's eyes widened. "I know," she said softly, looking at the tree. "But I don't believe that." The man's expression softened, and he took a step closer. "Neither do I," he said. "The curse is just a story, a way to explain things people don't understand. Sometimes people fear what they don't understand." Solara's heart fluttered. "You don't fear me." The man shook his head. "No, your skin doesn't make you cursed. It's just skin." For the first time in years, Solara felt like she could finally breathe. She wasn't alone in the world. Someone, a complete stranger, didn't see her as a curse. "My name's Liam," the man said, holding out his hand. "And you are?" "Solara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, but then took his hand. And in that moment, everything seemed to change. For the first time, Solara didn't feel like a cursed soul wandering through the galaxy. There was someone who saw her for who she truly was, not as a curse, but as a person. As the years passed, the stories of the cursed people spread far beyond the borders of Jasara. What had once been whispered in secret was now shouted in every corner of the galaxy. Solara's skin, and the skin of those like her, became a symbol of fear and dread. It wasn't just the people of Jasara who believed in the curse anymore. Whole star systems did. The tale of the cursed race and their dark power traveled from planet to planet, from one space station to another, carried on the lips of travelers and merchants, shared in the shadows of crowded bars, and under the bright lights of alien marketplaces. As much as Solara had tried to ignore it, the legend was bigger than just her. It had taken on a life of its own, shaping how everyone in the universe viewed her kind. The curse wasn't just a story anymore. It had become a truth, a dangerous truth that no one dared question. And it all began with one moment, one small but powerful event that changed everything. The first incident. It had happened many generations ago, but the details were still fresh in the minds of those who lived in the outer galaxies. A young woman, Kayla, had been born with skin that gleamed as dark as the night sky. As a child, She had shown signs of an extraordinary gift. She could move objects with a simple thought. She could manipulate the elements, calling the wind to her command, shaping fire with a flick of her hand. To her people, this was nothing short of miraculous. But the rest of the universe wasn't so kind. The first time a cursed one had displayed their power, it was seen as a threat, not a blessing. A galaxy-wide panic erupted. Rumors spread like wildfire that Kayla's powers were connected to the curse that had been foretold. Some said that she was a weapon. Others claimed she was a bringer of destruction. As fear took hold, the people of the neighboring systems began to unite in their distrust and hatred. No one cared that Kayla had never harmed anyone. They saw only the skin that marked her as cursed. The universe, as it often does, reacted with fear, and fear quickly turned to violence. Kayla was hunted down, forced to flee her home, and the tragedy of her death became the foundation of the legend that now lived in every starship and every city's library. A curse so powerful that it could change the course of history. From that moment on, the people of Jesara, Solara's ancestors, had been marked. Their very existence was seen as a ticking time bomb, and their powers, which were once revered as a gift, were now feared as a dangerous curse. It wasn't just the people on Jesara who were affected. People from across the galaxies began to avoid them. When anyone saw someone with dark skin, they would turn away. They would whisper and point fingers. It didn't matter if the person had done nothing wrong. It didn't matter if they were kind or harmless. Their skin color alone was enough to make them dangerous in the eyes of the universe. Solara often thought about how the galaxy viewed her and her people. To her, it felt like a never-ending nightmare, a dream where no matter what she did, she could never escape the fear in the eyes of others. She would walk through crowded marketplaces, and people would step aside, casting wary glances. Parents would quickly pull their children away. Merchants would quietly close their stalls, as if her very presence could destroy their livelihoods. Solara knew that these people weren't evil. They were just scared. But that didn't make it hurt any less. She had grown tired of the pity, tired of being looked at like a monster. Sometimes, when the weight of it all became too much, she would retreat to her favorite place, the wishing tree. There, she could sit quietly and try to imagine a life where she wasn't feared for the color of her skin. As the legend spread, it grew more twisted and exaggerated. New versions of the story emerged, each more frightening than the last. Some said that the cursed people had the power to bring down entire planets with a single thought. Others said that their skin could absorb light and energy, making them impossible to stop once they began to destroy. There were even whispers that their power came from an ancient evil force, a dark entity that lived deep within the universe, waiting for the right moment to unleash chaos. These stories were shared by the media, played on the screens of every starship, and broadcast across the universe. The universe's collective fear of the cursed people only deepened as these stories spread like wildfire, feeding the growing mistrust. The cursed ones were no longer just people. They were boogeymen, terrifying figures that lurked in the shadows of every galaxy. The stories were so powerful that even the wisest of beings started to believe them. Solara had seen these stories. She had heard them repeated by the voices of politicians, by the holograms in the sky, by the storytellers in the towns and cities. They spoke of her people as if they were inevitable harbingers of doom. As a child, Solara had believed that one day she might grow up to prove them wrong, to show the universe that her people were not cursed, but misunderstood. But as she grew older, she realized that it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just fear that had spread. It was hate. One day, as Solara sat in the marketplace, she overheard a conversation that made her heart ache. Two traders were talking about a recent attack on a planet far from Jesara. It had been destroyed by an unknown force, and the people of the galaxy had blamed it on a cursed one who had been spotted nearby. "It's always them," one of the traders said. "It's never anything good. First, they'd bring the storm, then they'd destroy the crops, and now they've burned down the city. It's just their nature." Solara's heart sank as she listened. She wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong. But she knew better than to challenge these beliefs. If she had said something, it would only confirm their fears. It was a never-ending cycle of mistrust. And the more the legend spread, the more difficult it became to escape the weight of it all. Even those who lived far away from Gisara weren't immune to the legend's power. It spread across the stars like a plague, reaching every corner of the galaxy. Every race, every culture, seemed to have adopted the same view. The cursed ones were dangerous, and they couldn't be trusted. It didn't matter that the cursed ones were just people like everyone else. The stories and the legends had already shaped how the universe viewed them. But there were some, like Liam, who didn't believe in the legend. They weren't swayed by the stories, and they didn't let fear rule their actions. Liam had spent years studying the ancient myths, the origins of the curse, and the history of the cursed people. He wasn't a believer in the tales of destruction. Instead, he saw the curse for what it was, a lie. A lie created by fear, by ignorance, by the need to control those who were different. Liam had been to many planets, studying old records, searching for clues about the real truth behind the curse. He had discovered that the curse wasn't really a curse at all. It was simply a misunderstanding, a manipulation by those in power who had used the legend to control and suppress the cursed people. The true power of the cursed people wasn't evil. It was a gift, a force for creation, not destruction. But no one was willing to listen. The legend had taken on too much power. People believed what they were told, and it was easier to fear than to understand. As the story spread further and further, Solara began to wonder, would there ever be an end to the legend? Would there ever be a time when her people were seen as something other than a curse? Or would she, like the generations before her, live a life marked by fear and suspicion? In the distance, she saw a figure approaching. Liam. She could see his calm expression as he walked toward her, as though he were unaware of the stories, unaware of the fear. He was different. He didn't see her as cursed, and for the first time in a long while, Solara allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, the legend didn't have to define her. Maybe together, they could rewrite the story. The universe, vast and filled with countless stars, seemed like a never-ending maze of possibilities. Yet for Solara, her world felt like a small corner of it. The stories of the cursed ones were endless, and everywhere she went, she carried the weight of them. No matter how far she traveled across the galaxy, people always knew her by the same label, cursed. And every time she faced someone's fear or judgment, it chipped away a little bit more of her spirit. But one day, everything changed. It happened in the most unexpected way. Solara had been walking through the marketplace in the capital city of Gisara when she noticed a stranger. He was unlike anyone she had seen before. His clothes were simple but well-traveled, and his eyes were filled with curiosity, not fear. He was a human, and he didn't seem to be aware of the unspoken rule. Stay away from the cursed ones. His presence felt different, like he didn't belong to the ordinary world where her skin marked her as dangerous. The moment their eyes met, something shifted. Solara instinctively looked away, expecting him to pull back or walk past her with a glance of fear. But instead, he stopped. His gaze was steady, not filled with the usual wariness. His lips parted, as if he were about to speak, but then he seemed to hesitate, as if choosing his words carefully. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice warm and calm. "But are you all right?" Solara's heart skipped a beat. This was not the reaction she expected. She could barely bring herself to answer. After all, her entire life had been filled with people avoiding her, looking at her like she was some kind of monster. Yet here was this stranger, asking if she was okay. It was as if the curse didn't exist for him. "I'm fine," she managed to say, her voice quieter than she intended. The man smiled, though it wasn't the usual pitying smile Solara had seen so many times before. His smile seemed genuine, like he was glad to see her. "I'm Liam," he said, extending his hand in greeting. Solara hesitated. No one ever reached out to her this way. She had lived her whole life, knowing that her touch could be feared, and yet here was someone who was offering his. She studied his face for a long moment, wondering if this was some sort of trick, a cruel joke meant to expose her as a danger. But there was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation. Tentatively, she placed her hand in his. "I'm Silara," she replied softly, still unsure what to make of the situation. Liam didn't let go of her hand immediately. He looked at her with an intensity that was both comforting and puzzling. It was as if he could see something beyond the skin, something deeper. It was the first time someone had looked at her like this. "You're different," Liam said, his voice thoughtful. "You know, the stories they tell about your people, they're not true, are they?" Silara's heart raced. She felt a wave of panic rise within her. Was he asking because he believed the stories? Was he testing her to see if she could live up to the myth? "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "The stories," Liam continued, his eyes still focused on hers. "The ones about the cursed ones, how they bring destruction and chaos. They're just stories, aren't they?" Silara opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. She had lived her whole life with these stories, stories that defined who she was before anyone even got to know her. The idea that someone might question them was almost too much to believe. For so long, she had accepted them as truth, just like everyone else. She had always thought she was cursed. But here was Liam, a human, telling her that those stories might not be true. "They're not all true," Silara said quietly. "I mean, some of it is. My people, we have powers, but we don't use them for destruction. We never have." Liam nodded slowly, as if trying to understand. "I've been traveling the galaxy, researching ancient myths and history," he said. "I've heard the same stories about the cursed ones, but I don't believe in them. I think there's more to the story than what everyone's been told. I believe your people are misunderstood. The truth has been hidden." Silara blinked, unsure whether she had heard him right. This human, a stranger from another part of the galaxy, was telling her that the truth about her people was being kept secret. It didn't make sense. For centuries, the curse had been accepted as fact. No one dared question it. And now, this one human, this one person, was suggesting that it was all a lie. "How can you say that?" Silara asked, her voice trembling. "The stories, they've been around for so long. How could it be a lie?" Liam's eyes softened. "I found evidence," he said. "Evidence that the curse isn't what people think. The truth is, your people were once revered for the powers you held. But someone, or something, twisted that truth. They turned your gifts into a curse. And over time, the people began to believe it." Silara's mind raced. This was too much to process. She had always believed that her skin made her different, that it was the source of her so-called curse. She had never questioned the stories she had been told. But now Liam was telling her that everything she thought she knew was wrong. "There's more to the story, Silara," Liam continued, as if sensing her confusion. "The people who wrote these stories, who spread them, they had their own reasons. They were afraid of the power your people held, the true power." Silara's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, true power?" Liam hesitated, his gaze flickering with something close to fear. "I don't think they were just afraid of your people. I think they were afraid of what you could do, what your people could do if they realized the truth." "What truth?" Silara asked, her voice barely a whisper. Liam stepped closer, lowering his voice as if afraid someone might hear. "Your people had the ability to change the fabric of reality itself. You were once seen as the stewards of balance in the universe. But when the rulers of the galaxy realized the extent of your power, they decided to control it. They spread lies, made everyone fear you. And now, people believe that your kind is dangerous, cursed." Silara felt a rush of emotions: shock, anger, confusion, and a small spark of hope. She had always been told that her people were dangerous. She had always felt the weight of that curse on her shoulders. But now, Liam was telling her that it wasn't her people who were dangerous. It was those who had spread the lies, the ones who had manipulated the truth for their own gain. "How do you know all this?" Solara asked, her voice shaking. Liam took a deep breath. "I've seen it. The records. Ancient texts hidden in forgotten places. There's a truth buried deep within the galaxies, and I believe you're the key to uncovering it. You're not cursed, Solara. You're the one who holds the power to undo the curse." The words felt like a lightning bolt to Solara's heart. For the first time someone outside her people, was telling her that she was not cursed. That her skin, her power, was not the source of destruction. It was the key to something greater, something she had never imagined possible. "Can you help me?" Solara asked, the question slipping from her lips before she could stop it. Liam smiled, his eyes bright with determination. "I can. Together, we can find the truth. We can uncover the past, and we can change the future. You're not alone anymore." Solara. For the first time in her life, Solara felt something shift deep inside her. A glimmer of hope, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, her life didn't have to be defined by the curse. Maybe she could change the story. Maybe the legend wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The universe had always been vast and filled with mysteries. Yet, until now, Solara had never questioned the story of her people, the so-called cursed ones. For as long as she could remember, she had been told that her people were born with powers too dangerous to control, that their skin marked them as something other than human. She had been taught to fear her own gifts, to hide them, and to avoid others who might see her as a threat. But after meeting Liam, everything she knew about herself, her people, and the universe had been thrown into question. She couldn't stop thinking about what he had told her. The idea that her people were not cursed, but rather misunderstood, seemed almost too good to be true. It was hard for Solara to accept, given how deeply ingrained the stories of destruction and fear were in the universe. But Liam had given her a glimpse of hope, a hope she had never dared to imagine. Liam had promised to help her uncover the truth, to reveal what had been hidden for so long. And Solara knew that she had no choice but to follow him. There was a chance now, however small, that she could change the course of her life and the fate of her people. The two of them set out to find the hidden truth about the curse. Liam had spent years researching, traveling to distant planets and hidden archives. He spoke of old texts, forgotten records, and secrets buried so deep that most people didn't even know they existed. Together, they would uncover these truths, starting with the ancient city of Venora. It was said to be one of the last remaining places that still held records from the old times, long before the curse was created. Venora is a place of great history, Liam had explained. It was once a center of knowledge, a city where scholars from all over the galaxy gathered. It was believed that the city's archives held answers to many of the universe's deepest questions, including the truth about your people. Solara had been hesitant at first. The journey to Venora was long and dangerous, and there were many obstacles between them and the ancient city. But Liam had been insistent. "If we're to uncover the truth, this is where we need to go." And so, with determination in their hearts, they embarked on their journey. Their first stop was a small ship docked in a quiet spaceport. It was a humble vessel, nothing like the sleek starships used by wealthy traders or powerful diplomats. But it was all they could afford, and Solara didn't mind. She was used to traveling in small, unremarkable ships. In fact, she preferred it. Being unnoticed felt safer. As they boarded the ship, Solara felt a sense of anticipation build inside her. The crew of the small ship, a few experienced pilots and engineers, welcomed them without question. Unlike most others, they didn't stare or avoid her. It was a strange feeling for Solara to be around people who treated her like anyone else, but she welcomed it. Liam took a seat beside her in the small cabin, his eyes focused on a map displayed in front of him. "We'll be heading to the outer edge of the Antar Nebula," he said. "From there, we'll follow a narrow route that should take us close to Venora." Silara nodded, though she still had many questions. She had never ventured so far from her home on Jasara before. The galaxy was a big place, and she had never imagined traveling through it with someone who seemed to understand her in a way no one ever had. But as they traveled, a sense of unease began to settle in. Silara had always been aware of the way her people were viewed, but now, more than ever, she began to sense the weight of it. What would they find when they reached Venora? Could they really uncover the truth? Or would the lies be too deeply woven into the fabric of the universe to ever be unraveled? It wasn't long before their journey took them to the Antar Nebula, a dense cloud of gas and dust that surrounded the outer reaches of the galaxy. The ship navigated carefully through the nebula, the thick clouds blocking much of the light from the stars. It was quiet, almost eerily so, as they traveled deeper into the unknown. "This is it," Liam said, pointing to a distant planet hidden within the clouds. "Venora is on the other side of this field. We'll have to be careful. The nebula is known to cause disruptions in navigational systems, and the area around Venora is dangerous." Silara's heart raced. She didn't know why, but she felt a strange sense of foreboding. It was as though the universe itself was warning them to turn back. But she knew she couldn't. This was the moment that could change everything. The ship continued on, the sensors flickering as they entered the heart of the nebula. They could feel the turbulence, the way the ship rocked as it passed through the dense clouds. Silara gripped the armrest of her seat, trying to keep calm. Liam, however, remained focused, guiding the ship with a steady hand. After what felt like an eternity, they finally emerged from the nebula, and the once-hidden planet came into view. Venora was a quiet, ancient world, its surface covered in ruins and overgrown with thick vines and moss. But beneath the surface, there were secrets that Silara and Liam had come here to find. The ship touched down gently on the surface of the planet. The air was thick with the scent of the earth, and the sky was dimmed by the cloud cover above. As they stepped off the ship, Silara could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This was a place of great importance, a place where knowledge had once flourished, and now it stood abandoned. They made their way through the ruins, following the paths that had been carved into the stone by time. The city was ancient, with crumbling walls and broken pillars, but it still held the remnants of its former glory. It was clear that this place had once been filled with scholars, scientists, and explorers, all dedicated to learning the secrets of the universe. Liam led the way, his eyes scanning the ruins with a mix of excitement and reverence. "This is it, Silara," he said, his voice full of awe. "The archives are somewhere here. We just have to find them." As they walked deeper into the ruins, Silara's mind raced. What would they find in the archives? Would it truly reveal the truth about her people? Could it prove that the curse was a lie, or would it only confirm her worst fears? They eventually reached the heart of the ruins, where a large stone structure stood. The door was overgrown with vines, but Liam easily pushed them aside, revealing a set of stairs leading downward into the earth. The air inside was cool and musty, but there was something almost sacred about the space. This was a place of knowledge, and it felt as though the weight of centuries of wisdom lay within its walls. They descended the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the silence. At the bottom, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with ancient tablets and scrolls, their surfaces covered in strange symbols. The archives were exactly as Liam had described, vast, hidden, and untouched by time. Liam smiled. "This is it. This is where we'll find the truth." They spent hours poring over the ancient texts, deciphering the symbols, and reading the forgotten records. It was slow work, but with each discovery, the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. Silara learned about the Ancient Order, the powerful group that had once protected her people. They had been guardians of balance, protectors of the universe, until someone powerful, had decided to manipulate the truth and turn the people's gifts into a curse. The documents revealed that the curse was never a natural phenomenon. It was engineered by those who feared the power of Silara's ancestors. They had spread lies to control her people, to prevent them from realizing their true potential. And then, in a dusty corner of the chamber, they found a final scroll, one that had been sealed for centuries. It contained the most shocking revelation of all: the true origin of the curse. It wasn't a curse at all. It was a story crafted to divide the people, to separate those with power from those without it. Solara felt her heart race as she read the final words of the scroll. She had always known there was more to the story, but now, with the truth laid bare before her, she understood. Her people were never cursed. They had been misunderstood, manipulated, and hidden away from the truth of their own power. For the first time in her life, Solara felt a deep sense of clarity. The truth was no longer buried in the shadows. It was right here in front of her, and she was ready to face it. She wasn't cursed. She was part of something greater. And with that knowledge, everything changed. The truth was out. It had been hidden for centuries, buried deep within the ruins of Venora. But now, Solara knew the truth. Her people were not cursed. They were misunderstood, victims of a story twisted and told by those who feared their power. She had always believed that the curse was her burden to carry, something that defined her very existence. But now, she understood that she was not the cause of the universe's troubles. It wasn't her skin or her abilities. It was the lies that had been spread about her people. For the first time in her life, Solara felt a spark of hope. She was not a monster, nor was she a danger to anyone. The powers that ran through her veins were not something to be feared, but rather something to be embraced. She wasn't the one who needed to change. It was the universe around her that needed to open its eyes and see the truth. But the truth alone wouldn't be enough. As powerful as the revelation was, Solara knew that it was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. If she wanted to change things, if she wanted her people to be free of the lies that had shackled them for so long, she would have to fight. And that fight would not be easy. The universe had been shaped by these lies for so long that changing it would require more than just uncovering the truth. It would require action. Liam, standing beside her in the archives of Venora, understood that just as well. The scrolls and tablets they had uncovered spoke of an ancient order, a secret society of those who had protected her people. But these records also spoke of betrayal. The leaders of the galaxy, the ones who had once revered her people for their wisdom and power, had turned on them. They had manipulated the truth, hidden the real story, and made her people into villains in the eyes of the universe. The rebellion had begun long ago, but it had been crushed. Her people had been scattered, their true power kept hidden, buried beneath the weight of lies. But now it was time for the truth to rise again, and Solara was ready to lead the charge. Liam turned to her, his face full of determination. "This is just the beginning, Solara. The truth is out, but we have to make sure it spreads. We can't let this knowledge stay hidden. Your people, our people, need to know that they are not cursed. They need to know that they have the power to fight back." Solara nodded, her heart pounding with resolve. She had spent so many years hiding, afraid of her own power. But now, she knew that it wasn't just her power. It was the power of an entire people, a people who had been silenced for far too long. The universe had been shaped by fear, and it was time for that fear to end. "We need to gather others," Solara said, her voice steady. "Others who will stand with us, who will fight for the truth. We can't do this alone." Liam nodded. "I know a few people. There are others out there who've been fighting for the truth. We just need to find them." With the knowledge they had gained from the archives, Solara and Liam set out on their mission. Their first destination was the planet of Goreth, a world on the edge of the galaxy where rumors of resistance movements had been whispered for years. It was said to be a place where those who opposed the current order gathered in secret, a place where rebels could regroup and plan their next move. The journey to Goreth wasn't easy. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, and they had to be careful. News of their discovery would spread quickly, and they couldn't afford to be caught by those who still believed in the lies. The Galaxies' leaders had powerful forces at their disposal, and Solara knew that if they were found, they would be hunted down. As they traveled through the stars, Solara couldn't help but think about the people she was trying to help. Her people had suffered for so long, believing the lies that had been told about them. How many of them had been killed because of these lies? How many had lived in fear, too afraid to speak out or to show their true selves? And how many had been forced into hiding, just like she had? She knew that the rebellion would not be easy. It would be a fight against centuries of propaganda, against a system that had been built on fear and misinformation. But she was ready. For the first time in her life, she felt a fire inside her that she had never known before. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her people, for their freedom, for their right to live without fear. As they approached Goreth, atmosphere grew tense. The planet was a desolate one, with harsh deserts and towering mountains. The people who lived here were survivors, survivors of the galaxy's many conflicts, survivors of oppression, and survivors of the lies that had been spread about Solara's people. This was a world built on resistance, and Solara hoped that the people here would be willing to join their cause. Their ship touched down on the outskirts of the planet, where a small group of rebels waited for them. They were a rough-looking crew, dressed in simple clothing and armed with makeshift weapons. But there was something in their eyes that told Solara they were ready to fight. Liam stepped forward, greeting them with a nod. "We've come with a message," he said. "A message of truth. The curse isn't real. Your people are not cursed." The rebels exchanged wary glances. They had heard rumors, of course, but they weren't sure what to believe. The lies about the cursed ones had been spread for so long that even the bravest of rebels had doubts. But Solara could see something in their eyes. The same look she had seen in Liam's eyes when they first met. Curiosity, and perhaps hope. Solara stepped forward. "I am Solara," she said, her voice steady. "And I've come to tell you that the stories about my people are lies. We are not cursed. We have been lied to, manipulated, and divided. But the truth is finally out. It's time for us to unite, to fight for what is right, and to take back our place in the galaxy." For a long moment, there was silence. Then one of the rebels stepped forward, a tall woman with short, dark hair and a scar running down her cheek. "I don't know if I believe you," she said, her voice low. "But I've seen what your people can do. I've seen the power you have. And if what you say is true, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to fight back." Her words sparked something in the others. One by one, the rebels stepped forward, nodding in agreement. They had been waiting for this moment, waiting for someone to come and show them the truth. And now that it was here, they were ready. Solara felt a surge of hope rise within her. This was just the beginning, but it was a beginning she had never dared to imagine. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Liam by her side, and now she had these rebels, people who were willing to fight, to risk everything for the truth. "We will fight," Solara said, her voice strong. "We will spread the truth, and we will take back what is ours. Together, we can change the galaxy." The rebellion had begun. The galaxy had lived in fear for centuries. Fear of the truth, fear of the unknown, and most of all, fear of Solara's people, the ones they had called cursed. It wasn't just a simple lie that had been told about them. It was a story that had been woven so tightly into the fabric of the universe that no one questioned it. No one dared to. But now, after everything that had happened, Solara and her group of rebels had one goal in mind: to tear that story down, piece by piece, and make the truth known. The first step had been to gather the rebels, to build an army that could stand against the forces that kept her people hidden and oppressed. The rebellion had grown quickly. What started as a handful of people on the harsh planet of Goreth had spread to other corners of the galaxy as more and more joined the fight for freedom. Solara's message had resonated with those who had suffered for too long, those who had been forced into the shadows, and those who were tired of living in fear. They all came together, united under a single cause: to destroy the lies that had been told about them. But as the rebellion grew stronger, so did the opposition. The leaders of the galaxy, those who had built their power on the foundation of these lies, would not give up without a fight. They had everything to lose: their control, their power, and the very order that had allowed them to rule unchallenged for centuries. Solara knew that the moment they started speaking the truth, they would be met with resistance. But she was ready. They had spent months organizing, gathering intelligence, and preparing for the final showdown. The truth was powerful, but it wasn't enough on its own. To truly break the chains of oppression, they would need to strike at the heart of the galaxy's power. The Central Council, the ruling body that had maintained control over the galaxy for centuries, had to be exposed for what it truly was: a corrupt institution built on lies, manipulation, and fear. Solara stood in the war room of their hidden base on the planet Tarnus, a world far from the prying eyes of the galaxy's rulers. The room was filled with maps, holograms, and blueprints, plans for the upcoming assault on the Council's headquarters. This was it. The time for secrets and whispers had passed. It was time to take action. It was time for the reckoning. Liam, who had been by her side since the beginning, stood next to her. His face was a mixture of determination and anxiety. They both knew that what they were about to do would change the galaxy forever. There was no turning back now. "We've done everything we can," Liam said, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed his nervousness. "We've got the truth on our side. We've got the people. But we still don't know what we'll be up against at the Council headquarters. The galaxy's leaders are not going to just sit back and let us expose them." Solara nodded. "I know, but they had centuries to keep this secret, and they've done nothing but spread lies and fear. We have to take this chance. It's now or never." She looked at the holographic map before her, studying the intricate layout of the Council's fortress-like headquarters on the planet Caldera. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by the galaxy's finest soldiers, and filled with advanced technology that could easily wipe out any rebel force. But Solara wasn't afraid. The truth was their greatest weapon, and as long as they had it, they had a chance. "Remember," she said to the group gathered in the war room, "our goal is not to destroy the Central Council, not yet anyway. Our goal is to expose them for what they truly are. We need to broadcast the truth to the entire galaxy. Once the people know the truth, once they see what's really been happening, we won't need to fight anymore. They will rise up, and together, we will tear down the system that has kept us in the dark." The rebels around her nodded, their faces set with determination. They had seen the same injustice that Solara had seen. They had heard the same lies. And now, they were ready to act. The final assault on the Central Council began with a strike against the outer defenses. The rebel ships, sleek and fast, tore through Caldera's atmosphere, diving low to avoid detection. They had planned everything down to the smallest detail, but still, Solara couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline as they flew closer to their target. This was the moment that would decide everything. As they neared the Council headquarters, Solara's mind raced. She thought about her people, the ones who had been oppressed for so long, the ones who had been forced to live in the shadows. This was for them. This was for everyone who had been told that they were cursed, that they were monsters. They were not monsters. They were powerful, and they were going to prove it. The ship shuddered as they passed through a blast of energy from the Council's defense systems. But the rebels were ready. They had trained for this. Their ships were equipped with shields and weapons capable of neutralizing most of the Council's security measures. The first wave of rebels had already infiltrated the outer perimeter, disabling the defense systems one by one. The way was clear. Once they landed, Solara led the charge. The group moved swiftly through the corridors, each step bringing them closer to their goal, the central broadcast room, where they would transmit the truth to every corner of the galaxy. It was a place of immense power. It was the heart of the Central Council's control, and Solara knew that if they could get to it, they could change everything. They were met with resistance, of course. The guards and soldiers of the Central Council were well-trained and ruthless. But the rebels fought with everything they had. The central area of the headquarters was a war zone, with explosions rocking the walls and weapons flashing in every direction. But Silara and her group pressed on, knowing that they couldn't afford to lose ground. The truth had to be broadcast, no matter what. Liam, who had been fighting beside her, looked at her as they moved through the chaos. "We're almost there, just a little further." Silara didn't answer immediately. She was focused, her heart pounding with anticipation. They had come too far to turn back now. The final leg of their journey was the hardest, as they encountered the fiercest opposition yet. But Silara's mind was set. She couldn't stop now. Finally, they reached the broadcast room. The doors were locked, but it didn't matter. With a few quick movements, one of the rebels, an expert technician, broke the seal, and they were inside. The room was vast, filled with screens and machines that controlled the transmission of information throughout the galaxy. Silara could feel the weight of it all. This room had the power to change everything. She stepped forward and activated the main console. "This is Silara, leader of the rebellion," she said, her voice calm but steady. "And this is the truth." The screens in the room flickered to life, and for the first time in history, the truth was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Silara's face appeared on every screen, and her voice echoed through the galaxy's communication systems. She told the people of the universe the truth about her people, how they had been lied to, how they had been manipulated, and how they were never cursed. As she spoke, the truth spread like wildfire. People everywhere watched in shock and disbelief, as the reality they had been told for so long began to unravel before their eyes. Silara knew that this was it. The galaxy would never be the same again. And then the explosion shook the building. The Council had launched a counterattack, but it was too late. The truth was already out. The battle wasn't over. There were still forces loyal to the Council that would fight to maintain the old order. But Silara knew one thing for certain. The reckoning had begun. The people of the galaxy would no longer stand by in silence. They would rise up, and together, they would take back their future.